At the edge of the map, where the land unravels into wind and water, lies Patagonia, the bottom of the world. Here the continent itself seems to lose its balance, tapering into islands and storms. Stretching across more than 400,000 square miles, Patagonia spans both Argentina and Chile. Yet for all its size, it remains one of the most sparsely populated regions on Earth. To the west, Chile's Patagonia is a labyrinth of fjords and glaciers. To the east, Argentina's side unfolds in open plains, salt lakes, and cliffs where the land feels infinite. Even now in the 21st century, Patagonia still feels like a frontier. Nature rules here absolutely and unapologetically. And as the continent narrows toward its southernmost point, the land breaks apart. Mountains sink into the sea. Here lies Tierra del Fuego, the land of fire. A name that feels almost ironic because down here there's not much fire, only ice, water, and an endless wind that never seems to rest. The name came from the first Europeans who sailed by these shores, Ferdinand Magellan's crew in 1520. As their ships pushed through the cold mist of the strait that now bears his name, they saw countless flickering lights on the horizon. Bonfires lit by local people, the Selknam and Yagan, who had lived here for thousands of years. What Magellan's men didn't understand was that they were witnessing one of the last purely nomadic cultures on Earth. People who moved with the seasons, who knew every inlet and island, who could read weather in the color of clouds. This archipelago is split between Chile and Argentina, divided by the invisible line of history and politics. On one side, the wild fjords and glaciers of Chile. On the other hand, Argentina's southernmost province. Peat bogs and windswept grasslands stretch toward jagged mountains, while forests of twisted beech trees bend under the constant wind. Among them sits Ushuaia, the last city before the end of the world. It began as an outpost in the late 1800s, built by Anglican missionaries among the Yagan people. Later became a penal colony, Argentina's answer to Siberia. The government believed that if it sent prisoners this far south, they'd never try to escape. They were right. The land itself was the prison. The cold, the forests, the endless distance, all of it formed invisible walls. The convicts cut timber, built the docks, and laid the railways. There's irony in that. The prisoners who once tried to escape this place ended up making it livable. Ushuaia isn't just far south. It's far from anywhere. Buenos Aires is almost 2,000 miles away and Antarctica feels within reach. But like everything in Patagonia, Ushuaia evolved. The old prison became a museum. The docks are filled with fishing boats and ferries. What once was exile turned into attraction. The end of the world became a destination. Walk through Ushuaia's streets and you feel the contradiction everywhere. Brightly painted houses cluster on hillsides, their corrugated metal roofs weighed down against the wind. Inside warm cafes, tourists sip coffee and plan expeditions. Outside, that wind, always that wind, howling down from the mountains like it's trying to push the whole city into the sea. If Ushuaia is the heart of this world's end, then the Beagle Channel is its bloodstream. A long, cold passage between Argentina and Chile that stretches along the southern edge of Tierra del Fuego. The channel takes its name from HMS Beagle, the ship that carried a young Charles Darwin through these waters in the 1830s. Darwin's journal entries from this voyage reveal a man both fascinated and horrified by what he saw. The raw power of nature, the struggling existence of the indigenous peoples, the sense that civilization's rules simply didn't apply here. It runs about 150 miles from east to west, connecting the Atlantic and the Pacific through a maze of islands and coves. Small boats navigate around rocky outcrops crowded with sea lions, their sleek bodies glistening in the weak sun. They bark and fight for space, unbothered by the passing vessels. To the west, the channel disappears into a labyrinth of fjords. Out there, glaciers spill their ragged tongues right into ice-cold waters. Places like this remind us how small we are and how vast the world can be when you finally run out of road. In the middle of the channel, a lonely lighthouse stands on a rocky outcrop roughly 5 nautical miles east of Ushuaia. Les Éclaireurs, the Scouts in French, is a title given to the chain of islets by early explorers of the region. Completed in 1920, the structure replaced an earlier beacon used by Argentine naval expeditions. The tower rises 33 feet high, painted in red and white horizontal bands, and built from brick and concrete. Its light flashes every 10 seconds and is visible for nearly 7 nautical miles on clear nights. Unlike many of the world's maritime beacons, it has always been automated and uninhabited, maintained remotely by Argentina's navy. Les Éclaireurs is often mistaken for the mythical lighthouse at the end of the world made famous by Jules Verne's 1905 novel. In reality, that title belongs to San Juan de Salvamento Lighthouse on a remote island farther east. But mythology rarely cares about accuracy. The image of a lone lighthouse at the edge of everything captures something deeper than geography. Captures a feeling. At the far end of the Beagle Channel, Martillo Island hosts one of the southernmost penguin colonies on Earth. Isla Martillo, as it's called in Spanish, is part of the Estancia Harborton, the oldest ranch in Tierra del Fuego, founded in 1886 by Anglican missionary Thomas Bridges. For decades, it was just another cold, uninhabited patch of land, occasionally visited by fishermen. Until the penguins came. Every October, when the austral spring begins to melt the frost and the days grow longer, thousands of Magellanic penguins waddle ashore to nest. The colony numbers around 3,000 breeding pairs, and though most will migrate north by late March, some remain year-round. Over time, other species join them. Genta penguins, recognized by their orange bills and white headbands, established a smaller colony here. And in recent years, even a handful of king penguins have begun to appear, straying from their usual range farther south. A living sign of how Patagonia's ecosystem keeps shifting in response to changing climate and warmer currents. Scientists monitoring the colonies have documented changes in breeding patterns, arrival times, and chick survival rates. The data tells a story of adaptation but also of stress. The ocean is changing faster than evolution can keep up. Leaving the Beagle Channel, the sea opens and changes character. Calm waters give way to the Drake Passage, one of the world's roughest stretches of ocean, famous for strong winds and ever-changing weather. Among the swells, a dark silhouette of Cape Horn rises from the water. The surrounding ocean is a critical point for shipping, but also notoriously dangerous, earning the Cape a reputation as a graveyard of ships. More than 800 vessels are believed to have sunk in these waters over the centuries. Some sailors speak of Cape Horn with the same reverence others reserve for sacred mountains. The first recorded rounding was by Dutch navigator Willem Schouten in 1616, who named it after his birthplace, Hoorn. Later, Ferdinand Magellan's route through the strait became the safer passage, but Cape Horn remained the ultimate test for sailors. To round the Horn from east to west, against prevailing winds and currents, was to prove yourself against nature's fury. Since then, Cape Horn became an essential passage for European trade ships traveling between the Atlantic and Pacific. Sailors feared the Cape for sudden storms and unpredictable currents. Even today, commercial vessels approach it cautiously. Though the Panama Canal long ago replaced it as the primary shipping route, Cape Horn retains its mythic status. It marks a boundary, a place where the rules change. Back on the mainland north of Ushuaia, a narrow trail leads to a lake hidden among snow-capped mountains. Laguna Esmeralda, true to its name, glows in impossible shades of turquoise. The color is unbelievable. Not just green, not just blue, but a shade so vivid it almost doesn't belong in nature. On sunny days, the surface gleams like glass. When clouds come, gray hues appear as if hiding some secret beneath the waters. At the far end, the Ojo del Albino Glacier descends between two cliffs, feeding the lake with meltwater year-round. And that's where the color comes from. Glacial silt suspended in the water, scattering light into that electric hue. The hike to reach Laguna Esmeralda takes about 3 hours through peat bogs and lenga forests. The trail is muddy, often waterlogged, and the wind cuts through even the best layers. But that difficulty is part of the experience. What comes easily is rarely remembered. It looks like a painter's impossible palette left untouched by human hands. Standing at the shore, you understand why indigenous peoples considered places like this sacred. Not because of what they believed happened here, but because of what the place makes you feel. Small, quiet, grateful. The islands of Tierra del Fuego are separated from the mainland by the Strait of Magellan, a narrow, twisting passage connecting the Atlantic Ocean with the Pacific. Before the Panama Canal was built, this was the southern gateway to the world, the main route for ships rounding the continent. The waters here are unpredictable. Shifting currents, strong winds, and sudden fog that can erase the horizon in minutes. Yet for centuries, sailors braved it because there was no other way. Ferdinand Magellan spent 38 days threading through its channels, guided only by luck and endurance. His crew was terrified. They saw the fires on shore, heard sounds they couldn't identify, and believed they were sailing into hell. Modern ships still use the strait, cargo vessels, research boats, and cruise liners heading toward Antarctica. And even now, when satellites can trace every curve, crossing it feels like an adventure. The water changes color constantly. Deep navy, then pale green, then back to gray. Dolphins sometimes race alongside boats, arcing through the bow waves like they're showing off. About 20 miles northeast of Punta Arenas, in the middle of the strait, lies another penguin sanctuary, Isla Magdalena. If Martillo Island in the Beagle Channel were an intimate family gathering, Magdalena is a metropolis. Here, tens of thousands of seabirds turn the landscape itself into something alive. In autumn, they begin to return from months spent at sea. And by December, the island hosts more than 60,000 breeding pairs. Compared to Martillo, where penguins share the beaches with gentoos and the occasional king penguin, Isla Magdalena is almost exclusively Magellanic territory. From the moment your boat approaches the island, you see them everywhere, scattered across the slopes, crossing the path, diving into the sea. There are no enclosures, no barriers, just a marked trail cutting through one of the densest penguin colonies on Earth. The landscape around the island is sparse, almost barren, but for the busy families it's perfect. Low dunes, hardy grasses provide shelter from the wind and predators. Each pair digs a burrow, sometimes reusing the same hole for years. The chicks emerge in late November, gray and fluffy, constantly begging for food with high-pitched squeals. Watching the colony, you realize how much energy goes into survival. Both parents take turns fishing, sometimes traveling 50 miles offshore to find food. When they return, their crops are full of small fish and squid, which they regurgitate for the chicks. It's exhausting, relentless, and somehow the birds do it every year. From Isla Magdalena, the Strait of Magellan threads south through a maze of fjords and peninsulas that make up the southern tip of Chile. On the shores of one of them, the Ultima Esperanza Sound, lies Puerto Natales, a small port town surrounded by mountains. The name, Last Hope, was given to the fjord by a Spanish explorer who had nearly run out of both supplies and luck while searching for a passage north. He didn't find it, but the name stuck, fitting for a place that feels like both an ending and a beginning. Puerto Natales was officially founded in 1911, but its history reaches back to the late 19th century when settlers began arriving to raise sheep. The nearby plains proved perfect for grazing, and the region quickly became part of the booming Patagonian wool industry. British, Croatian, and Chilean settlers established estancias, vast sheep ranches that still define much of the surrounding countryside. Some of these ranches cover hundreds of thousands of acres. Standing at their edges, watching sheep dot the landscape like scattered snow, you get a sense of Patagonia's scale. This is a land that resists human proportion. The waterfront is the heart of the town. From the pier, you can see snow-dusted peaks rising beyond the sound. Fishing boats rock gently in the harbor. Gulls wheel overhead, their cries mixing with the sound of water slapping against hulls. It's a working port, not a resort town, and that authenticity gives it character. This is Torres del Paine National Park, one of South America's most spectacular wilderness areas. Leaving Puerto Natales, paved roads fade into gravel and civilization slowly disappears. What opens ahead is a vast landscape of granite towers and glaciers that spill from the southern Patagonian ice field, the third largest ice mass on Earth. The name Paine comes from the Tehuelche word for blue, and everything here seems to carry that color. The lakes, the mountains, even the shadows. At its center rise the park's most famous features, the Torres del Paine and the Cuernos del Paine. Massive rock formations sculpted by ice over 12 million years. The Torres, 3 vertical spires reaching more than 9,000 feet, are often shrouded in fast-moving clouds. Hikers who attempt to reach their base start in darkness, climbing for hours through forests and boulder fields. Most arrive just as dawn breaks, and if they're lucky, if the weather cooperates, they watch the granite towers ignite in golden light. That moment lasts maybe 10 minutes. Then the clouds roll back in, the towers disappear, and you're left wondering if you really saw what you think you saw. It's the kind of experience that feels almost religious, not because of belief but because of scale. You're confronting something so much older and larger than yourself that the normal categories of thought don't apply. Nearby, the Cuernos with their dark sedimentary caps and pale granite bases show the geological layering that makes this range unique. They look like horns, hence the name, thrust up from the earth at impossible angles. Geologists say the formations are the result of magma intrusions that cooled underground, then were exposed by millions of years of erosion. But knowing the process doesn't diminish the wonder. Despite its remoteness, the park attracts hundreds of thousands of visitors each year. The weather shifts constantly. A mix of rain, snow, and sunlight that can all happen within an hour. You learn to dress in layers, to expect nothing, to appreciate whatever the mountains decide to reveal. But that volatility is part of its character. Torres del Paine doesn't promise comfort. It promises perspective, showing how landscapes can be both harsh and delicate. The park is also home to guanacos, wild relatives of llamas, that graze in herds across the steppes. Andean condors circle overhead, their wingspans reaching 10 feet. And if you're exceptionally lucky, you might spot a puma, the apex predator that stalks these mountains with silent efficiency. At the foot of the mountains, hidden among wind-carved hills, lies one of Patagonia's strangest and most evocative places. The Cave of the Milodon, a space that's been occupied for more than 10,000 years. First by giant animals, later by the humans who hunted them. The cave was made famous in 1895 when a local settler discovered a piece of strange furry hide preserved by the cold air. It turned out to belong to a Milodon, an extinct giant ground sloth that once roamed southern Patagonia. The creature stood over 10 feet tall, weighed several tons, and had massive claws designed for stripping leaves from branches. It disappeared around 10,000 years ago, but the discovery sparked worldwide fascination. For a moment, scientists even wondered whether the creature might still survive in the remote valleys of Chilean Patagonia. Newspapers ran sensational stories. Expeditions were launched. None found living Milodons, but the myth persisted for years. Since then, excavations have revealed evidence of early human presence. Stone tools, fire pits, and bones with cut marks. The cave became a time capsule of a world that existed before glaciers fully receded, when the line between man and beast was still being drawn. Standing inside the cave now, looking out at the grasslands beyond, you can almost picture it. The fire is crackling. The sloth's hide is drying on racks. People huddled against the cold, telling stories about the animals they'd seen, the places they'd traveled. Not so different from what we do today. Crossing back into Argentina, the road winds east toward El Caliphate, a frontier outpost between the endless steppe and the ice of the Andes. Before tourism, it was just a small settlement supplying nearby sheep ranches' houses with tin roofs. A general store. Not much else. But the story changed in the mid-20th century when Los Glaciares National Park was established and the town became the main access point. The name Caliphate comes from a hardy Patagonian shrub that bears dark blue berries. Local legend says that anyone who eats the fruit is destined to return to Patagonia. Maybe that's why travelers keep coming back. Drawn not only by the glaciers, but by the strange beauty of this remote land. Something about Patagonia gets under your skin. It's not the easiest place to love. The wind is relentless. The distances are vast. Services are limited. But maybe that's precisely why it matters. In a world that's been mapped, measured, and optimized, Patagonia still feels a little bit wild. Just outside town lies Laguna Nimes, a protected reserve and home to more than 70 species of birds, including a large colony of Chilean flamingos. On calm days, their pink reflections ripple across the turquoise water. A surreal contrast against the snow-covered Andes in the background. The flamingos feed on small crustaceans in the shallow water, filtering them through specialized beaks. When they take flight, the air fills with the sound of beating wings and their honking calls. It's unexpected finding tropical-looking birds in a place this cold. But Patagonia is full of such contradictions. Yet for most visitors, El Caliphate serves as a gateway to one of Patagonia's most iconic spectacles, the Perito Moreno Glacier. Unlike most glaciers which retreat quietly into history, Perito Moreno moves forward, calves and cracks. The glacier stretches nearly 100 square miles, but it's the front wall, almost 200 feet above the waterline, that grabs attention. From the observation decks, the ice looks impossibly blue. A color so pure it seems unreal. And the sound is overwhelming. Ice shattering, tumbling into Lago Argentino with a splash that echoes across the mountains. Every few minutes, the glacier groans and a piece collapses into the water. There's a rhythm to it, a breathing force of nature. Deep fissures carve the ice into jagged towers. Small caves open to reveal walls of perfect azure. In some sections, the ice looks almost transparent, like frozen glass, while in others, it's blackened with sediment collected over millennia. What makes Perito Moreno unusual is that it's one of the few glaciers in the world that is not retreating. It's in equilibrium, advancing at roughly the same rate it melts. Scientists aren't entirely sure why. It might be the angle of the valley, the amount of snowfall at higher elevations, or some combination of factors we don't fully understand. Every few years, the glacier advances far enough to dam off a side channel of the lake. Water builds up behind the ice wall, sometimes rising more than 100 feet. Eventually, the pressure becomes too great and the ice bridge collapses in a spectacular rupture. Thousands of people gather to watch when this happens, though predicting the exact moment is impossible. The spectacle can last hours or happen in minutes. The sound of the collapse carries for miles. It's a reminder that we're watching something immense and indifferent to our presence. The glacier doesn't perform for us. It simply does what ice does, following physics and gravity with no concern for cameras or crowds. A few hours north, we meet one of Patagonia's most recognizable silhouettes, Mount Fitzroy. And at its foot hides El Chaltén, Argentina's trekking capital. Born in the 1980s as a strategic foothold in a border dispute with Chile, it's grown into a mecca for hikers and climbers chasing the perfect skyline. Above it all rises Fitzroy, or as the Tehuelche people once called it, Chaltén, the smoking mountain. Not because it's volcanic, but because the peak is so often wrapped in its own private cloud. At over 11,000 feet, it's not the tallest in the Andes, but few mountains command the same reverence. The approach is part of the experience. Trails begin almost at El Chaltén's doorstep, winding through lenga forests. The trees give way to alpine meadows, then rocky moraines left by retreating glaciers. The weather changes in minutes. It's not a place that bends to human schedules. Fitzroy decides when it will show itself, and most days it doesn't. But when the clouds finally part and that serrated skyline glows against a cobalt sky, every blister, every gust of wind feels worth it. Climbers come from around the world to attempt its walls. The mountain has a reputation. Vertical granite faces, unpredictable weather, and routes that require both technical skill and patience. Many expeditions spend weeks camped at the base, waiting for a weather window that might never come. Those who do summit often describe it not as a conquest, but as a kind of conversation with the mountain. It allows you up if you're respectful, if you're lucky. El Chaltén itself has the feeling of a place still figuring out what it wants to be. Hostels and gear shops line the main street. Breweries serve craft beer to wind-burned trekkers. There's no cell signal in most places, which feels refreshing rather than frustrating. You're here because you want to disconnect, to trade screens for summits. Further away from the Andes, landscapes are different. Endless plains, wind-bent shrubs, and skies that seem to go on forever. Somewhere in this desolate expanse lies one of the oldest human expressions on Earth. Cueva de las Manos, the Cave of Hands. Hundreds of hands, red, white, black, and ochre, spread across the walls, layered one over another. They're small, delicate, most of them belonging to adolescents or women, and they've been here for more than 9,000 years. Using mineral pigments and hollow bones, they blue paint around their hands, leaving behind stencils that somehow feel more human than any sculpture or monument. Each hand is both anonymous and deeply personal. A signature, a declaration we were here. The cave sits in a remote canyon along the Pinchuras River. Getting there requires driving hours on dirt roads through landscapes that look unchanged since those hands were first made. The silence is profound. No traffic sounds, no planes overhead. Just wind and the occasional cry of a hawk. Standing in front of the cave, you realize you're looking at something that connects directly to the people who made it. Not through history books or interpretations, but through gesture. Someone stood here, placed their hand against this rock, and breathed pigment around their fingers. That act, so simple and so intimate, survived millennia. Alongside the hands are hunting scenes. Guanacos and rheas are pursued by tiny human figures. The animals are rendered with surprising detail, capturing movement and anatomy in ways that suggest deep observation. These weren't casual doodles. They were important enough to be placed permanently on stone. But we head back to the mountains, gliding over one of Patagonia's most striking natural wonders, Lago General Carrera. Formed by glaciers thousands of years ago, it's the largest lake in Chile and the second largest in South America. The waters are so vividly blue they seem lit from within. And beneath their surface lies a secret. The marble caves. They were sculpted by waves over 6,000 years into smooth corridors, columns and domes of swirling blue and white stone. The walls are slick and polished, glowing softly as the sunlight filters through the turquoise lake outside. On calm days, the reflections of the caves are mirrored perfectly in the lake's surface, creating the illusion of floating through an endless blue sphere. Geologically, it's pure chemistry. Calcium carbonate dissolved and reshaped by water erosion. But standing there, it's impossible to think in those terms. It feels more like art. Every turn reveals a new pattern. The caves are accessible only by boat, and water levels dictate how far inside you can go. In spring, when glacial melt swells the lake, the caves fill almost completely. In late summer, water levels drop and larger chambers open. Local boatmen navigate the passages with practiced ease, steering between pillars and ducking under low arches. Light plays tricks here. Blues shift from pale aquamarine to deep sapphire depending on depth and angle. Some sections glow almost white where the marble is purest. Others streak with gray and rust where other minerals have infiltrated. The effect is dizzying, beautiful, and slightly unreal. North of the lake, the Carretera Austral winds through some of the wildest terrain in South America. It's not a highway in the usual sense, more a long narrow thread of gravel carved through mountains, fjords and temperate rainforest. Somewhere along this road lies Quillet National Park, home to one of Chile's most surreal natural sights, the Hanging Glacier. An immense wall of ice suspended between two dark cliffs, seemingly floating above the valley. It looks impossible. A glacier hanging in midair. Its base ends not in a lake but in a space. From that gap, meltwater cascades down hundreds of feet in a roaring waterfall, disappearing into the forest below. Scientists say the glacier once reached the valley floor. Over centuries it retreated, leaving behind that dramatic drop. The process continues. Each year the glacier pulls back a bit more. Eventually, perhaps within our lifetimes, it may retreat entirely and the waterfall will stop. Visiting Quillet feels like witnessing something temporary. Not just your visit but the feature itself. The glacier is leaving, slowly but inevitably. That impermanence adds weight to the experience. You're not just seeing a place. You're seeing a specific moment in geological time. On the shores of Argentina's Atlantic coast, Puerto Madryn was founded in 1865 when Welsh settlers landed here after a perilous voyage across the ocean. They came seeking freedom, land, and a place to preserve their language and culture. What they found was a harsh, windswept coast that tested every ounce of their determination. Today, the town's famous for the giants that visit its bay every year. From June to December, the calm waters of the Golfo Nuevo fill with southern right whales. Massive creatures that migrate thousands of kilometers from Antarctic feeding grounds to mate and give birth near the coast. Sometimes they appear right off the pier, mothers and calves gliding slowly through the turquoise water. Boat tours on the Valdez Peninsula itself bring you close enough to hear their breathing. A deep, thunderous exhale that echoes across the still sea. The southern right whale was once hunted almost to extinction. Slow-moving, rich in oil and floating when dead, it was the right whale to hunt. By the 20th century it had nearly disappeared. But here along the protected bays of Valdez, the population has rebounded. The peninsula became a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1999, recognized as one of the most important breeding grounds for the species on Earth. Watching a mother whale lift her calf to the surface for its first breath, you witness something ancient and essential. These creatures have been doing this for millions of years, long before humans arrived to complicate the ocean. Valdez isn't just about whales. Orcas patrol the beaches, sometimes launching themselves onto shore to snatch sea lion pups in a hunting technique found almost nowhere else on Earth. Elephant seals haul themselves onto the sand, massive males battling for territory. Magellanic penguins nest in burrows along the coast. The peninsula is a showcase of Patagonian marine life. Trelew is another town born from the dreams of Welsh immigrants who crossed the Atlantic in the 19th century. Its name is a nod to the grain mill around which the settlement slowly grew. While nearby Puerto Madryn marked their first arrival, it was here that many of them finally found a landscape reminiscent of their instant homeland. The town streets are quiet, lined with tidy houses, flower gardens, and tea rooms serving scones and homemade jam. The local school still teaches some Welsh history, and family names like Jones, Hughes, and Roberts remain common. It's surreal finding this pocket of Wales transplanted to the southern tip of South America. But the Welsh connection is only part of Trelew's story. The town is also home to one of the most important paleontological museums in South America. The Egidio Furullo Museum houses an extraordinary collection of dinosaur fossils found in the surrounding region. Patagonia, it turns out, was a dinosaur hotspot during the Cretaceous period. Beyond the town, the road climbs into the mountains and into one of Argentina's most beautiful protected areas, Los Alerces National Park. It was created to protect the Alerce or Patagonian cypress, one of the oldest living tree species on Earth. Some of these giants are more than 3,000 years old. Their trunks are massive and bark thick like armor. Walking among them feels like entering a cathedral. The trees tower overhead, their canopy filtering sunlight into soft green light. The forest floor is covered in moss and ferns. Everything is quiet except for the occasional bird call or the distant sound of water. The oldest known Alerce in the park is estimated to be 2,600 years old. It was already ancient when Rome was founded. It was here that the Tehuelche people first arrived in Patagonia. It watched the Spanish arrive, the wars of independence, and the creation of modern Argentina. And it's still here, still growing, though much more slowly now. Nearby, another town began as a trading post for settlers and sheep ranches, but its real story arrived on rails. Esquel grew around one of Patagonia's most ambitious projects, the Old Patagonian Express. a part of a grand plan to connect Argentina's remote southern territories by rail. But construction stopped short, and Esquel became the line's final station. Against all odds, the little train endured, becoming one of the last narrow-gauge steam railways still in operation anywhere in the world. Its nickname La Troquita comes from the tiny 30-inch wide track, one of the narrowest ever built. The locomotives, small steam engines imported from the United States and Germany, still burn wood and diesel. The route from Esquel to Naucalpan, only 11 miles away, may be short, but it feels like a journey through time. The train chugs through grasslands and past small Mapuche communities, its whistle echoing across the steppe. Riding La Troquita, you understand why people fought to keep it running. It's not just transportation. It's a connection to an earlier era, a slower pace, a way of experiencing landscape that airplanes and highways can't replicate. Off the coast of southern Chile, Chiloé Island feels apart from the rest of the country, as if the ocean around it preserved not only the landscape but the way of life. The island's story began long before the Spanish arrived. The Huilish people first lived here in perfect harmony with the sea. Later came the Spanish and Jesuit missionaries, building wooden churches in every village, more than 60 in total. Each one blends European design with local carpentry and native wood. The churches are Chiloé's most famous landmarks, 16 of them designated as UNESCO World Heritage Sites. They're unlike any churches elsewhere. Built entirely from wood, shingle-clad, and painted in bright colors, they look more like fairy tale cottages than houses of worship. Inside, wooden columns rise like trees. The craftsmanship is extraordinary, all done without nails, using only wooden pegs and joints. But Chiloé's most famous images are the palafitos. The stilt houses were built by fishermen who needed to live close to their boats. At high tide they seem to float. When water retreats, wooden stilts sink into the exposed mud. Many were once humble homes and workshops. Over time, some fell into disrepair. Others were restored into guest houses and art studios. Their facades, painted in bright colors that fade beautifully in the rain, mirror the island's spirit. Practical and quietly beautiful. Chiloé has its own cuisine, mythology, and dialect. People here will tell you they're Chilote first, Chilean second. That sense of distinct identity runs deep. The island is also famous for its potatoes. Chiloé is believed to be the origin point for potato cultivation, with hundreds of native varieties still grown here. The local markets burst with colors: purple, red, yellow, and white potatoes in every size and shape. Puerto Varas, one of the most picturesque towns in Patagonia's northern edge, sits quietly on the shores of Lake Lanquihue. It was founded in the mid-19th century by German settlers invited by the Chilean government to colonize the Lake District. Their influence is everywhere in the steep-roofed wooden houses, the tidy gardens, and the pastries in the cafes. On the other side of the lake, the reflection of Osorno volcano stretches across the water. A flawless cone of snow and lava. Rising to 8,700 feet, it dominates everything. The slopes are so smooth they look drawn by hand, masking the violent history beneath. Over the past 200,000 years, Osorno has erupted more than 10 times, shaping the valleys and changing the color of the soil. The most recent eruption was in the early 19th century, sending lava flows down the mountain and ash across the region. Today it's considered dormant but not extinct. The mountain sleeps lightly. At the foot of the mountain, the Petrohue River carries turquoise glacial water through hardened lava flows. Over time, the current carved the rock into smooth, otherworldly shapes, now known as the Petrohue waterfalls. The water crashes through narrow channels, foaming white against black basalt. The color contrast is striking. Brilliant turquoise water, dark volcanic rock, and the green of the surrounding forest. The sound is constant, a roar that drowns out conversation and makes you feel the river's power in your chest. Crossing the Andes from Chile into Argentina, we arrive at San Carlos de Bariloche, the meeting point of wilderness and civilization in the heart of Argentina's Lake District. Surrounded by peaks that rise directly from the water, founded in the early 1900s by German settlers, it grew into the Argentine Switzerland. Alpine-style chalets and chocolate shops blend with the Patagonian scale. The town's growth began with the creation of Nahuel Huapi National Park in 1934, Argentina's first. The park protects over 1.7 million acres of mountains, forests, and lakes. It's a landscape that shifts dramatically with the seasons. Summer brings hikers and kayakers. Winter transforms it into a ski resort, one of South America's premier destinations for snow sports. The town itself sits on the shore of Nahuel Huapi Lake, spreading up the hillsides and terraces. At night, lights twinkle against the dark mountains, and the lake reflects them like a mirror. There's something almost European about the scene, which is exactly what the founders intended. They wanted to create a piece of Switzerland in South America, and in many ways they succeeded. The main street, Mitre Avenue, is lined with chocolate shops. Bariloche is famous for its chocolate, and locals take it seriously. Shops offer tastings, tours of production facilities, and chocolates in every form imaginable. It's become part of the town's identity, along with the mountains and lakes. Circuito Chico, a 37-mile loop that climbs into the hills west of town, winds through forests, passing hidden bays and small chapels. Viewpoints offer 360-degree panoramas of blue lakes and snow-capped peaks stretching all the way to Chile. On clear days you can see Tronador, the Thunderer, a massive mountain on the border that gets its name from the sound of ice breaking on its glaciers. Along the way the road passes Hotel Leo Leo, the grand Patagonian lodge built in the 1940s. Its timber and stone design became the model for mountain architecture across the Andes. The hotel sits on a peninsula surrounded by water on three sides, with mountains as a backdrop. It's the kind of place that makes you want to sit on the terrace with a book and never leave. Bariloche's stone and timber streets lean towards the vast blue mirror of Lake Nahuel Huapi, the immense glacial heart of northern Patagonia. Born from ice ages long gone, it sprawls over 60 miles in length with fjord-like arms cutting deep into the mountains. The lake's waters are startlingly clear, sometimes turquoise, sometimes navy depending on the light. On calm days the surface turns to glass, mirroring the snowy peaks and the drifting clouds above. The name comes from the Mapuche language, Island of the Jaguar. That hint of mystery feels right. Beneath the surface lies not only great depth, almost 1,500 feet, but also stories and legends. The most famous is that of Nahuelito, a mythical creature, Patagonia's own cousin of the Loch Ness Monster. Sightings have been reported for decades. Descriptions vary. Some describe a serpent, others a plesiosaur-like creature with humps breaking the water's surface. Most locals tell the story with a grin, but part of them still leave room for wonder. The lake is massive, deep and largely unexplored. Who's to say what might be down there? Science dismisses the legend as misidentifications of logs, waves or waterfowl. But legends don't need to be true to be meaningful. They reveal something about how people relate to place, how mystery adds depth to landscape. At the northern edge of the lake, a quiet town is hidden in the trees. While Bariloche grew into a city, Villa La Angostura stayed closer to the land. It's the kind of place where people still leave their doors unlocked. The town takes its name from the narrow peninsula La Angostura that separates the arms of Nahuel Huapi. The landscapes are extraordinary. A blend of wild Andean forest and postcard calm. The crown jewel is the Arrayanes Forest, a grove of cinnamon-colored trees with smooth, twisting trunks that glow almost orange in sunlight. The Arrayan grows elsewhere in Patagonia, but never in such pure concentration. The forest here is the only one of its kind in the world, and some trees are said to be more than 300 years old. Walking through it feels like entering a fairy tale. The trunks are cool to the touch, almost cold. The bark peels away in thin layers, revealing fresh cinnamon underneath. Overhead, the canopy filters light into a warm golden glow. Around town, Lago Corontoso empties into Nahuel Huapi through one of the world's shortest rivers, just a few dozen feet long. Despite its brevity, the river is powerful, with crystal clear water rushing over smooth stones. Local fishermen prize it for trout, and on summer evenings, you'll find them standing waist-deep, casting lines into the current. From here begins one of the most celebrated roads in Argentina, the Road of the Seven Lakes. Though in truth, there are more than 7 if you count the hidden ones behind the hills. It's one of South America's most scenic drives. Along the route, mountains soften into rounded ridges and rivers of turquoise water cut through valleys. The landscape shifts constantly. One moment you're driving through a shadowed forest. Next, the trees part and lakes gleam under the sun. Small roadside pullouts invite pauses. Not the kind of stops you plan, but the ones that happen because you can't not stop. Each lake has its own character. Espejo Mirror Lake reflects the surrounding peaks so perfectly that it's hard to tell where water ends and sky begins. Corontoso is deep and dark, its surface ruffled by constant wind. Villarino is small and intimate, tucked into a fold in the mountains. The route traces an old path once used by Mapuche communities moving between valleys. They knew these lakes long before they had Spanish names, before roads connected them. Today it's a pilgrimage of sorts for travelers, road trippers and backpackers drawn by the idea of a place where the world still feels whole. The road ends, or maybe begins, in San Martín de los Andes, another charming alpine town on the shore of Lago Laccar. Founded in 1898, the settlement began as a military outpost. Its purpose was to secure the country's southern frontier, still disputed with Chile. Gradually, this outpost turned into a mountain town, a place for hikers and travelers. The architecture is distinctly Patagonian. Steep roofs, wooden facades, and stone foundations built to withstand heavy snow. The lake itself, Lago Laccar, stretches for 15 miles with cliffs and thick forests on both sides. Its waters are so clear that from a boat, you can see straight down to the submerged branches of fallen trees. The lake drains westward through the Huahum River, crossing into Chile, one of the few Argentine lakes that naturally flows toward the Pacific. That unique geography made it a key route for trade and communication long before any roads were built. Not far from San Martín de los Andes, a snow-capped peak begins to rise above the forest line, perfect and symmetrical. Seen from any direction across the lake or even miles away in Chile, the cone looks like the blueprint from which all volcanoes were drawn. This is Lanín Volcano, the sacred mountain of northern Patagonia. A frozen pyramid soaring over 12,000 feet. The highest summit in Argentina's Neuquén province. It's part of the Andean volcanic belt, a string of peaks born from the slow collision of the Nazca and South American tectonic plates. Though Lanín is considered dormant, fumaroles near the summit occasionally release steam, reminding climbers that the mountain is not quite asleep. The volcano gives its name to the park that surrounds it. A vast wilderness stretching across more than 1 million acres. It was established in 1937, one of Argentina's earliest national parks, protecting not just nature but identity. Because to the Mapuche people, Lanín is a living spirit. The name itself comes from their language, meaning dead or extinct, referring to its lack of recent eruptions. But dead is misleading. To the Mapuche, Lanín is home to the Pilin, the guardian of the natural world. A force both protective and dangerous, demanding respect from those who enter its domain. Climbing Lanín is a serious undertaking. The standard route requires ice axes, crampons, and experience with glaciated terrain. Weather windows are narrow. Many attempts are turned back by storms that appear without warning. Those who do reach the summit describe views that stretch from the Pacific Ocean to the Argentine plains, a perspective that makes the effort worthwhile. But the cone of Lanín is not alone. Further west, the volcanic belt continues, punctuated by two more peaks. One of them, the Villarrica volcano, is one of South America's most active and charismatic mountains. Standing 9,300 feet tall, it's capped with glaciers that melt into a network of lakes and rivers, feeding the forest below. Unlike Lanín, which has slept for thousands of years, Villarrica is active almost constantly, producing lava fountains and ash plumes visible from miles away. Its lava lake, sometimes exposed at the summit, glows like a molten heartbeat. At night, the crater pulses red, casting an eerie light across the snow. The volcano's flanks are cloaked in Andean Patagonian forests, and glacial meltwater forms a web of turquoise lakes. In winter, the upper cone disappears beneath snow, transforming Villarrica into one of Chile's premier ski resorts. In summer, the dark volcanic rock emerges, steam venting from cracks in the ice. Guided tours to the summit attract hundreds of climbers each year. The ascent is steep but non-technical, following a well-worn path through ash and ice. At the top, if conditions allow, you can peer into the crater and see the lava lake churning below. The heat is intense, even through layers of clothing. The smell of sulfur burns your nostrils. It's both terrifying and exhilarating standing at the edge of the Earth's interior. Deep within Argentina's Neuquén province, forests fade into a volcanic plateau. The air turns dry and rivers carve through ochre rock. Here, among the lonely mesas of the Andes foothills, hides one of Patagonia's most striking waterfalls, Salto del Agrio. The name itself, Agrio, means sour, a nod to the river's acidity. Fed by mineral-rich runoff from the Copihu volcano, its waters carry sulfur, iron, and copper. These elements give the canyon its palette. Red, orange, and yellow walls stained as if painted by fire. The waterfall drops about 150 feet into a narrow gorge, the acidic water foaming white against rust-colored stone. The basalt formations surrounding it are remnants of ancient lava flows, solidified into geometric patterns. From certain angles, they look almost man-made, too regular to be natural. Scientists have studied the Agrio River's chemistry for decades. Its pH levels can drop below 2.5, comparable to lemon juice. Yet microbial life thrives within it. Extremophiles that feed on iron and sulfur. These organisms are similar to those found in volcanic craters or deep-sea vents, offering clues to how life might exist on other planets. The Copihu volcano, 10 miles upstream, is one of the few active volcanoes in Argentina. Its last eruption occurred in 2016, sending ash clouds thousands of feet into the air and forcing temporary evacuations of nearby villages. The volcano sits on the border with Chile, its summit straddling both countries. At its foot, Caviahu sits on the shores of a lake of the same name. Its waters are equally rich in minerals. Known for its thermal baths, it's one of the few places in Argentina where you can soak in volcanic hot springs. The water emerges from the ground at temperatures around 140 degrees Fahrenheit, cooled slightly by the time it reaches the pools. The milky blue mirror of Lake Caviahu is surrounded by black volcanic slopes and forests of strange prehistoric trees. Araucaria araucana or monkey puzzle tree. Ancient evergreens that have existed since the age of dinosaurs. They can grow over 150 feet tall and live for more than 1,000 years. Their sharp, scale-like leaves spiral around thick branches, forming a geometric pattern that looks almost artificial. The trees are dioecious, meaning individual trees are either male or female. Female trees produce large pine cones that can weigh several pounds, filled with edible nuts that have been harvested by indigenous peoples for thousands of years. Araucaria forests once covered vast areas of Patagonia, but today they survive mainly in protected regions. Fossilized remains found nearby show that their ancestors thrived here over 200 million years ago, long before the Andes even existed. Walking among them feels like stepping back in time, to an era when these trees shared the landscape with dinosaurs. And speaking of dinosaurs, Patagonia's fossil record is extraordinary. The region has yielded some of the largest dinosaurs ever discovered. Argentinosaurus, estimated to weigh up to 100 tons, once lumbered across these plains. Giganotosaurus, a predator larger than Tyrannosaurus rex, hunted here. The town of Plaza Huincul in Ucayne province sits at the heart of dinosaur country. The municipal Carmen Funes Museum houses a replica of Argentinosaurus, so massive it barely fits inside the building. Nearby, paleontological sites continue to yield discoveries. In 2014, researchers announced the finding of Patagonia mayorum, potentially the largest dinosaur ever discovered, weighing an estimated 70 tons and measuring over 120 feet long. These discoveries remind us that Patagonia's story stretches back far beyond human history. The landscapes we see today are recent, geologically speaking. The mountains are young. The glaciers are even younger. But the bedrock beneath holds memories of entirely different worlds. From the volcanic plateaus of Ucayne, we drift north toward the edge of Patagonia proper. The landscape begins to change again. Mountains give way to rolling hills. Lakes are becoming fewer. The wind, always the wind, continues to blow. Near the town of Junín de los Andes, the Chimehuan River flows clear and cold from the mountains. It's considered one of the finest trout fishing rivers in the world. Fly fishermen come from across the globe to cast lines into its pools and riffles. Brown trout and rainbow trout, introduced from North America in the early 20th century, have thrived here beyond anyone's expectations. The river valley is beautiful in an understated way. Not the dramatic peaks of Torres del Paine or the massive ice walls of Perito Moreno, but quieter. Gentle curves. Gravel bars. Forests of southern beach reflected in slow-moving water. The kind of beauty that reveals itself slowly, that grows on you the longer you look. Standing in the river at dawn, watching mist rise off the water and feeling the current pull against your legs, you understand why people return here year after year. It's not just about catching fish. It's about being in the river, being part of the landscape, even if only temporarily. The northern boundary of Patagonia is disputed. Some draw the line at the Colorado River. Others place it further south. But definitions matter less than feeling. You know when you've left Patagonia not because of a sign or a map, but because something in the air changes. The wind softens. The land warms. The sense of being at the edge fades. Looking back across everything we've seen, Patagonia reveals itself as a land of extremes and contradictions. Glaciers and deserts. Ancient forests and volcanic barrens. Penguins and pumas. Welsh tea rooms and Mapuche sacred sites. Nothing about this place is simple or easy to categorize. Perhaps that's why it draws people. In a world that's increasingly standardized, where you can find the same stores and restaurants in every city, Patagonia remains stubbornly itself. It doesn't bend to expectations or convenience. It offers beauty but on its own terms. It offers adventure but with real consequences. The people who live here year-round understand something that visitors glimpse only briefly. That hardship and beauty aren't opposites. That isolation can be a gift. That a place doesn't need to be comfortable to be home. The gauchos who still work the vast estancias, the fishermen who brave the Strait of Magellan, the guides who lead climbers up Fitzroy, they've all made peace with Patagonia's demands. And maybe that's the final lesson of this place. That the world doesn't owe us ease. That some things are worth struggling for. The landscapes that test us are often the ones that change us most. The indigenous peoples who first inhabited these lands, the Tehuelche, Mapuche, Selknam, and Yaghan, understood Patagonia in ways we're only beginning to appreciate. They didn't try to conquer it or tame it. They learned to move with it, to read its patterns, to take what it offered and endure what it withheld. Many of those cultures are gone now, destroyed by disease and displacement in the waves of colonization that swept through in the 19th and 20th centuries. The Selknam, once numbering in the thousands across Tierra del Fuego, are functionally extinct. The last full-blooded Selknam died in 1999. Their language, their stories, their knowledge of the land all lost. What remains are fragments. Photographs taken by early anthropologists. A few words were recorded before the last speaker died. Rock art in remote caves. It's not enough, but it's something. A reminder that this land has always belonged first to those who knew it best. Today, Patagonia faces new challenges. Climate change is altering landscapes faster than at any point in human history. Glaciers that have existed for thousands of years are disappearing within decades. Weather patterns are shifting. Species are migrating to new ranges. The Perito Moreno may still be advancing, but most of its neighbors are in full retreat. Scientists estimate that Patagonian glaciers have lost about 30% of their mass since the 1970s. That ice, once frozen, now flows into oceans, contributing to rising sea levels that will affect coastlines around the world. Tourism brings money and attention but also pressure. More visitors mean more impact. Trails erode. Wildlife becomes habituated to humans. Remote places become less remote. It's a balance that every national park and protected area struggles with. How do you share these landscapes without destroying what makes them special? There are no easy answers. But awareness is a start. Understanding that every visit has an impact. That leaving no trace isn't just a slogan but a responsibility. That places like Patagonia are finite and fragile, no matter how vast and rugged they appear. As we reach the end of this journey, standing metaphorically at the tip of the continent where land finally surrenders to sea, it's worth remembering what drew us here in the first place. The promise of something wild. Something real. Something that exists outside the sanitized, curated experiences that dominate so much of modern travel. Patagonia delivers on that promise, but not gently. It shows you beauty that can make you weep and wind that can knock you down. It offers solitude that can be peaceful or terrifying depending on the moment. It reminds you that you're small, that your time is brief, that the world was here long before you and will be here long after. And maybe that's exactly what we need. A place that refuses to make things easy. That demands something from us. Respect, patience, and humility. That shows us what the planet looks like when humans aren't in control. The maps have all been drawn now. The blank space is filled in. We know what's at the end of the world. But knowing doesn't diminish the power of actually going there, of standing on that windswept shore and feeling the spray of the ocean that marks the boundary between continents. Patagonia isn't really the end of the map. It's a beginning. A place where the scales fall from your eyes and you see the world as it actually is. Vast, ancient, indifferent to human concerns. And somehow, despite all that, achingly beautiful. Now, let us enjoy the nature and amazing scenes of this amazing region, and thanks for watching. See you soon.